I might have another question though.
Yes.
You mentioned yesterday an experience, a kind of experience, Vasana. You said you might develop a kind of Vasana for experience, for spiritual or for epiphanies.
Yeah.
That's one of the questions. And the other one, which is related to that, is does the person, or can the person in a way have an influence or produce those experiences, or where are those experiences coming from? You know, those kind of epiphanies. Is it possible that the jiva motivates, create, or in a way kind of encourage or support the development or the happening of those experiences?
So the causal body is the body of tendencies, right? We have all our tendencies, which is based on previous actions, that somehow leave some trace in the causal body, which becomes tendency. So some people have a tendency for making money, some people have a tendency for sport, some people have a tendency to be in nature, some people have a lot of tendency for sex, some people have a huge tendency for food, and some people have spiritual tendencies. Among the people with spiritual tendencies, some of them come with a vasana for spiritual mystical experience. Some others have a vasana, spiritual vasana for love and compassion, some people for philosophy or intellectual knowledge, understanding. And some people have just natural tendency to produce mystical experience. Mystical experience is somehow, it's something. I was sharing the other day that there is someone who is in contact with me. There is something wrong with the sound. Someone who is in contact is still a little bit funny, huh? Or
the sound is not clear.
Yeah, it's not good.
No,
I think it has to.
no, this is screwed in.
Huh?
I just wanted to. I think the trick that we tried once was having it having it bent so it's to the side of your mouth but relatively close.
Okay. And then maybe you can turn down the volume there.
No, that's good.
That's good. There's no need to be that loud, I would say. Okay, that was good. Yeah? Is it better now?
So on the side, close the button on the side, not in front.
And it seems that even that z is gone now. Huh?
That's good.
No?
That's good.
Or is it still there? It's still there, but we don't hear that. Good.
It sounds like interference.
Yeah, small interference. So some people, we all come with those tendencies, those vasanas, which are marks or impressions from previous experience that is deposited in our causal memory system. Okay? A very tight, small piece of information trace. And some people have this for spirituality. I was mentioned the other day, someone, and it's not the first time that I meet people in that situation, somebody that was living a normal life, and then about 5 years ago, or no, 3 years ago, he had an incredible non-dual epiphany that he did not work for in this lifetime. He did not have any spirituality to say, oh, this is the result of my actions. He just blew his mind and somehow established him in a certain state that he was happy, satisfied, feeling complete. He describes it as a state that he was God. That's in his, because as we know, an experience is only what we make of it as our interpretation. His interpretation, he was God and everything was coming from him and become one with him. So he stayed in that kind of a pleasant, satisfying state for 2 or 3 years, I think 3 years or 2 years. And when he realized that state was fading, it was too late. It left him, and he's not happy about having lost. And I met some other people with similar things. So how that epiphany came about? It came about from past karmas, actions from past lives or efforts that were made in previous lives and so on. And then one day it just fructifies, manifests as what we call Parabhada karma. And then we'll say, whoa, where did it come from? You know? Sometimes it's something very bad. They say, oh my God, how can Ishvara deliver a tumor on the arm of Ramana? The guy is a saint. How can the tumor come and affect him now, his body? No, but the whole system of karma is an impersonal system. And the one with knowledge does not take karma anymore personally, because he knows that it's all resolved into Ishvara. It's Ishvara's system of cause and effect, right? So where does those things come? It comes from the system, comes from Ishvara in accordance to one's Parabhada karma. We have those tendencies, and then the mind has a tendency to somehow go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi or have some mystical image, some hear sounds and musics and so on. Whatsoever tendency was there, it's going to be fructifying.
But is it possible to kind of, because at the end of the day they are not,
they're just an object.
They're not leading anywhere.
They are an object, like we are talking
They're an
about.
object. So is there something one can do? I mean, my question is whether this person, this jiva, is supporting or motivating those experiences. There's something you can do against that?
No, you don't do anything against that. You just see them for what they are. A projection coming from the mind, producing a certain object of experience, which is a subtle object, which may be pleasant, may be unpleasant, but you just discriminate. This is just an object appearing within me, and I'm the only real factor in existence, the one witnessing phenomenon. So you stay as the seer, the knower. You understand? Abhi,
Yes,
the light is going on and off. Can we change this, please?
What about the knowledge contained in all those experiences? There is whatever, and there is a Vedanta content. There's a lot of content, truth within that. Okay, it's an object. You can identify it as such, but still there is something. Like there's a message, and it's always the same message.
The message, to begin with, the message comes from the mind. The mind is what projects those subtle objects of experience, It's Ishvara, of course. Delivering one's karma is a tendency to contact a certain object of experience, which ultimately is a projection of the mind.
I don't quite agree with that, because if it's a third person interpreting that epiphany in a certain way, which is not his jiva, and he's saying that the same message I'm seeing it, it's not, it's not my mind which is interpreting the content of the epiphany, You know what I mean?
No, I don't understand.
If I ask Ramji, or if I tell Ramji about an epiphany and he makes an interpretation about, or interpretation about
We can do reading of dreams and many other projections. I say there is something about you, because every projection, the dream state is a projection of our vasanas, okay? The epiphany is a projection from our vasanas. It's all come from you, it says something about you, but it's irrelevant for the one in pursuit of knowledge of the self. You understand? Because it says something about the construct, the content of the mind.
He's saying something about my true nature, so to me it's not irrelevant.
It does not say the nature is the seer, the knower of the phenomenon. You understand?
Yeah.
That's where you are caught up a little bit, because you are still giving value to those objects, and it's natural. We get somehow involved, we get attached, identified, we enjoy.
Okay, let's leave it here.
Okay.
I
don't want to convince you. I mean, I respect your stand.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Can you do me a favor? Andre, can you give me the scripture there? And you said, thank you.
Are you okay? That's also good.
Maybe we still have one there. So any other question? Yes, Andrew.
What's the difference between the creator and the created?
It's the same thing. So Ishvara is the intelligent cause of creation, the material cause, the laws and rules governing and managing it, and the creation itself, which is the material cause, the intelligent cause, the laws, and therefore everything which is project. This is Ishvara. We have a romantic relationship to Ishvara to the degree that we imagine him to be the creator, so the creator and the deliverer of karma, of results of action. So we want to be in harmony. We want to conform our life to the Lord because we want him to take sympathy toward us and deliver our proper karma, Although Ishvara never makes a mistake. It's only a facilitator of our life, delivering always what belongs to us, the results of our efforts and actions. You understand?
So one's cause and one's the effect.
Huh?
So we could also
It's
call in the cause.
Yeah, no, the cause is Maya. Maya is the cause, and then Ishvara is everything. It's one single phenomenon, which involves the material cause, its material elements, its intelligence, the laws and rules governing it, and the projection in itself. It's one phenomenon. You understand?
Don't you call it Jagat, the creation?
Yeah, Jagat means the world. The world.
Yes.
Ishvara is, from the material, physical standpoint, is the world and the jivas appearing in the world as well. So there is an important element there, the world with its laws and rules, and the jivas are the only one that raise the concept called Ishvara, God, the creator and the ruler. And therefore we need to be to keep Ishvara in mind, because it's what is conditioning our experience here with by the delivery of our own thoughts and actions, the results of our thoughts and actions. It keeps present to ourselves, what we have been doing. So it's all one thing. It's interesting to note that to all other creatures, the concept of Ishvara does not come to place, does not arise. They just live life. They are integral parts of Ishvara, of the body of Ishvara, the material body of the universe, with all its beings, all with its jivas, and so on. So only from the standpoint of the human jivas we have this notion of creator. Why? Because we have a certain intelligence that can trace effect back to its cause. The first thing that comes to our mind is, if there is something here, there must be a cause, a creator. There is nothing we know that is not linked to a creator. So if we have any object, there is a creator. If you have one of those old style watches that used to be assembled by the watchmaker, if you see a watch like that, it's irrefutable proof of the existence of the watchmaker, right? Because as we have established already, there is no such a thing as non-existence. So nothing comes from nothing, always comes from itself in this case, which is this phenomenon, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect.
It implies second question. What determines the main predisposition of one or the other gunas? That is, what determines whether one jiva is mainly predisposed towards rajas and the other mainly towards sattva?
Well, one's past experience, past actions, past activities, past thoughts, karma. We are a byproduct of karma. We are a byproduct of our vasanas. And vasana is a byproduct of our actions. Action is a byproduct of our thoughts. Thoughts is a byproduct of our vasanas. It's just machinery. Why someone has a predisposition for Vedanta and someone has a predisposition for alcohol and drugs? Karma, right? Or we can call good merits or bad merits. Why someone is born in very, very precarious conditions, living on the streets of Rio de Janeiro, being chased and killed by certain groups, and raped and whatnot. Why some people is born in that condition, some people born with a good body, good mind, good family, good life, good circumstance, everything going for him or her. Why? How can we explain that? If we don't understand karma, we're going to say that Ishvara is unfair. There is injustice in the world. So unless we understand karma, we will be always, afflicted with the injustice, the apparent injustice of the world. One time I was almost electrified. Electrified is very dramatic. There is a group in the China world called the Forum, and some people, 1 year ago after I came from India back to where I was, and then there was a discussion there, and then I placed my opinion, and somebody came and said, but you're doing there, you have beautiful experience with Ranji, your mind is sattvic, you have much knowledge. What did you do for the poor or miserable people suffering in India? You did not do anything, And then I start presenting the logic behind karma, is that everything is perfect as it is. So I did not know what I was getting into. So there were 2-3 people there that started bringing up the list of injustice in India, the caste structure of the society, wives being burned for the sake of the louder? Dowry. And so, a big list, and you were there, you were doing nothing. And
Sure, you're disturbing your belief, so you better stay out of this discussion.
Yeah. So if you don't understand, you feel disturbed. If you understand, you say, "Hey, Ishvara, I know you make no mistake, and suffering is good." And then I start presenting the law. Suffering is good. When we have to suffer, it's better we tell Ishvara, "Bring it on. I want to be done with my karma." And not only that, in India, people, they are used to go through adversity, keeping Ishvara in mind, and okay, God, this is my dharma, my karma. So, and they have a beautiful smile on their face very often, beautiful people. And then these people not understanding karma, they start almost insulting me, making fun of me. That's when I report to Ramji. Ramji almost shut down completely the forum. And then some people had to block some of that people and so on. And so there is no injustice in the world. It appears as if there is injustice. You understand?
And it hurts, Of course it hurts if you see all the
I was confused. David raised his arm there, and then I hear a voice which was not from I have the light behind, I cannot see the face very well. I say, what happened with the voice of David?
I didn't know if I was interrupting another line of thought. Or you have more to say?
It's another line of thought? It's another question?
It's on the same topic, I just didn't know if I was interrupting.
Okay, no.
So, I don't know how one could know that karma is perfectly played out by Ishvara. How is that possible to know that for yourself, other than you accept it to be true?
You don't accept, you follow the logic presented by the scriptures on karma. And then by and by it's going to begin making sense, and you apply on your life, and then you see the connection between your thoughts, emotions, and then actions and the results. And then you start seeing that this universe is created and it's governed by pure intelligence, pure knowledge, intelligence, and rules governing from physical laws to psychological laws, moral laws. So you see that this is a very, very intelligent system, and it's not a chaos that happens by any chance. So as you work through these concepts, you may accept that as a valid concept based on your own mind and your own experience, based on your own observation, and then you at least you have something to live with. Okay, Lord, this is what it is. If it's coming to me, it's. Otherwise, we are left with a system that is absolutely chaotic. There is no longer any connection between cause and effect, and at that point, we are not motivated to stand up from our beds in the morning and go and do actions to gain something.
There's quite a difference between it is either utter chaos or it is perfectly unfolding, and there is no injustice.
Right.
Like those are two broad extremes. Yeah. So what's easy for me to say is the world is unfolding as it is.
As it is, yeah. According to its laws. According to its laws, we can say.
Right. And it's easy enough for us to say there's clearly injustice, but regardless of the injustice, it just is. I had cancer, for example, I had cancer 2 years ago, and I didn't say, as far as paying me back, I just said, this is just what's happening. And I wasn't
Totally.
struggling with that because it's just unfolding.
Yeah.
I didn't need to make a story about it, either that, oh, poor me,
Good
or
for you.
that it was a perfect unfolding. I just said, it just is.
Yeah,
And I was totally,
very good.
in a sense, I was totally cool with that, but it didn't need me to say that it's unfolding. Nor does it, when a bus of children goes off a bridge, do I need to say, it's so beautiful because the karma was unfolding, no adjustment.
No, there is no question. There is no question of being beautiful, ugly. You see, when we just let's remove the human jivas from the picture, and then we have all these other jivas. Life is happening all the time, as we say in USA. Shit happens all the time, you know. So it's a lot of things apparently tragic. Some animals eating little babes or destroying the eggs, you know, under the mother, and you know, you see, is there any notion of injustice among all other creatures? No, as you said, life is just is. You understand? The idea of wrong and right, bad and good, and justice, injustice, it just comes to our mind. And it's always in reference to our likes and dislikes, what appears to be pleasant and unpleasant. That's why we suffer psychological suffering. Other creatures do not have that experience because we establish any judgment from the standpoint of what I like, what I don't like. Yes, Jennifer?
Something you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that Vedanta really emphasizes the impersonalness of it, that this is all happening impersonally. So just like it happens, like you said, an animal eats another animal's newborn babies. As Dave just said, a busload of children, you know, go off a bridge and get killed. What's been helpful for me is to see that karma is impersonal.
Yeah.
And so when we say, oh, it's I've accumulated enough punya karma, right, which is the grace of God, to then Vedanta comes to me, it's not quite accurate. We just say it because we need to speak English, that it's happening, that I've accumulated enough punya karma. Actually, Ishwar there's enough karma punya karma that's been accumulated, and then Ishwar creates a body named Jennifer or Linda or Dave, and creates another body for this karma then to be unfolded. And that's been really helpful to me, to Vedanta really helped me with this thing that's impersonal. It's not personal.
Ultimately, that's the truth. No? Karma is not personal, jiva is not person, there is only jiva or jivahood or the universal eternal jiva being constructed by the elements again and again to give expression to vasanas, you know, karma.
That's why they say there's really no ego, because it's not personal.
Yeah.
Like I didn't accumulate good punya.
Yeah, but again, it's important to know that this is the ultimate knowledge. You know, there is no karma, there is no jiva. But from the standpoint of the jiva, unless he knows it for directly experience, and then he has to understand that his thoughts and actions are linked to the parabdha karma, their circumstance of life. You know, and the Ishvara is the deliverer of jiva's results of actions. There are two levels of teachings. What Jennifer was teaching is a higher teacher on the level of Ishvara. There is teacher on the level of the jiva, teacher on the level of Ishvara, and teacher on the level of awareness or consciousness.
Well, my understanding of this whole thing is answering Dave's question about how you can explain. You cannot explain this, no? So actually, the question, you have to investigate into the question. Why do you put a question on this? No?
Who wants to know that? Huh?
Yeah, so when I do this for myself, then I feel I'm hurt by the suffering in the world, which is very human and natural.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I can make up all explanations of karma and this and that, and it's just not any media, you know. But that is only to soothe my uneasiness about it. And,
Well-
That's
can I
necessary.
continue, please?
Sure, but that's necessary. We need to, Dave, what we have, we need to, that's what Vedanta, Dayananda really emphasizes, is that how we do need to resolve our psychological, it's important.
Yes, okay, I'm talking still, please listen. So, what's important for me is to look is what it comes from, and it comes from deep down I see a resistance, not able to accept it. That's what I really liked in Dave's statement. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So as soon as you can come to the acceptance of life as it is, then actually the problem is resolved. You don't need an explanation.
You don't need an explanation for anything. If you go to the Neo-Advaita, they are going to say that life is, isness is, you are the self and that's all, you know. But without the logic, the jiva is not so easily convinced, you know. It's easy to say like, oh, things are what they are. If that produces enough wisdom and dispassion so that one does not get affected by circumstance, and then it did the job, great. You understand, James? Dave? So that did the job. But for most people, we need a lot of understanding based on the logic as presented to this. What we are talking here is what Dave is talking is one of the qualifications or qualities of the jiva with hard and fast knowledge, which is dispassion. Dispassion is dispassion towards whatsoever life is present to us as circumstance or one's own karma. So where is this dispassion going to be based upon? It can be based upon, isness is. Well, if that does the job, again, easy, job done. But most of the time it's based on either on a total, complete understanding of Ishvara knowledge, the field and the laws governing our experience, or the knowledge I am the self, I am consciousness,
I would
I'm
say
free.
it's based on a complete trust, not an understanding. Trust is deep.
That's okay. Trust is only efficient to the degree that there is understanding backing it up. Otherwise, it's blind trust, and it does not really stick much.
The definition of trust is that you trust something you don't understand. That is the part of trust. You know? If you need understanding, then it means you don't really trust. So trust is a higher value for me.
Okay. So I see trust differently, and it's my understanding that the scriptures present trust as trust pending the result of your own investigation, which is going to bring about your own direct understanding of what the scriptures say.
Okay, all trust is provisional, yes, because if we know who we are, we don't need to trust.
The initial aspect of the trust is provisional, but it's going to bear fruits to the degrees that this trust becomes your own first-hand direct knowledge understanding.
But as long as you ask questions as a jiva, identification, we need this provisional truth.
Absolutely,
And when we are
totally.
realized, then it doesn't matter.
Totally, yeah, that's why we say that the most important qualification, the most fundamental is trust that the scriptures may be pointing us to the right direction. The scripture may be saying the truth, that there is a way out from psychological suffering. So at the beginning, this trust, as Dadrick is saying, is somehow it's a kind of it's a faith. You know, I trust it, and Vedanta says, but we don't want any blind faith here. We want faith only if it is provisional and pending the result of your own investigation, inquiry, analysis, and so on. So fundamentally, that's where our dispassion has ground. The dispassion is grounded in knowledge, and when we have the dispassion to say, okay, Ishvara decided it's my time to go. If that is not based on the knowledge we call self-knowledge, and if it's not based on the Ishvara knowledge, and then it's going to be based on faith that there is a God, and the God is taking me to heaven, and that's fair enough. some people may find
I
tranquility.
was not talking about faith.
I know. Some people may find tranquility about that. But I have seen some people in my family dying, and then in the last, very religious people, in my grandmother, she was about to die, asking, so I always like to ask these questions to people, so how is it? Are you afraid? And then she looked at me, who is not afraid of facing God and His judgment? So even if the people are saying that, no, I'm resolved because I trust in heaven and God, but there is always this question, because nobody has the proof of a God who takes you to heaven. It's just a concept, an assumption, or a good idea that calms our nerves, right? Very nice, good conversation. Let's go into our invocational. Sorry. Oh yeah, you want to make an? You want the? No. Don't.
Everybody hear me? I want to thank Julieta and Anya for supplying. There's now a container that right underneath the sign says donations for the hall. There's a cylinder that you can put money in, or you can give it directly to me, and I will give it to Satya for donations for the hall, so that we cover the cost of this. And then there's a little box that is donations for our Lindo, or you can give them directly to our Lindo. So thank you, Julieta and Anya, for providing these boxes. And suggested donation for our Lindo is either 150 rupees per satsang or 300 rupees for the day.
Yeah, and it's good to emphasize that these suggestion donations of 150, it's something so that people who drop in here and there, know that there is a certain base. Okay, try to contribute something. It's not necessary that we calculate to say, oh, I paid more because I paid the registration fee. Now, people who come and they pay the registration fee, it's great, and then if they have some more spare money to offer a donation, it's much appreciated, and mainly because I don't have much money being still, because we are too lazy to go and find a job. We don't want to find a job anymore.
But that's what Orlando talked about yesterday. It's separate from the hall. Like his donations is separate from the hall donations.
And don't forget to pay for drinks.
Don't forget to pay
Yes,
for
thank
drinks,
you.
yeah. And
Those donations go in the tin downstairs in the office.
And in case we have any doubt whether we paid it yes or not, so we just pay it again, not to take any chance. the mind is so tricky sometimes. Okay. Sadashiva Samrambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Isvaro Guratemeti Murti Beda Vibhagine Vyomavada Vyapata Dehaya Dakshinamurtya Namaha Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharantam Agocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sati Guru Pranatosh Maham Om Shanti Ramji Shankara Dayananda and all of us doing the good work. Verse 73, the self-consciousness is the substrate of the world. Perception causes objects to appear in consciousness and makes them appear to be separate from consciousness. So, what brings about objects? Well, we could say that perception. if my perception instruments or if my perception organs are not functional, there are no objects as far as I am concerned, right? So perceptions bring about, makes the objects appear in consciousness. And we imagine that those objects are separate, independent, and away from consciousness. So when we break down our experience, we see that the object is appearing through the perceptive instruments, and then appears in the perceptive organs that backs up the instruments, and then the mind cleans it up, integrates, and then makes it questionable here, submits the contact to the intellect. If the intellect makes some decision about what to do in regards to this contact here. So all of that happens like impersonally, as we were saying before. But what makes a person is the ability we have to take things personally, right? We take experience personally, we take perception personally, we take the body personally. Therefore we become a person. And all of that, of course, based on taking our physical body personally. We say it's my body, belongs to me. But it's all impersonal, as Jennifer was saying before. And the bottom line is the object that appears through the perceptive organs into the mind, into the intellect. So they are in fact appearing in the intellect, which is no other or not separate from consciousness itself. The intellect is consciousness instruments to know and experience. So what is the distance between the mind, the intellect, and consciousness? I know we have been going through this discrimination since many days now. We want to make a distinction between the intellect and consciousness. You see the apparent contradictions in the script? We are saying we need to separate and isolate consciousness from the intellect. And then another teaching comes and says, hey, by the way, the intellect is not separate from the consciousness, and therefore is the same thing as consciousness. So everything is consciousness, because everything is within the scope of consciousness. It's not separate from consciousness. Consciousness is there, pervading and sustaining and making everything exist. So we don't need to separate consciousness in the first place, because it's impossible to separate consciousness from objects, because objects are sustained by consciousness. So how can we pull consciousness to isolate consciousness? It's just a strategy, a teaching strategy, so that we can see our fundamental independent nature is non-dependable on objects, or something which is free from objects. We are free from any and all objects, although the objects are not separate from us.
At the same time, it's something which is familiar to us. So within ignorance, I think it's part of this confusion.
Can I ask you a very, very kind? Raise your arm, because sometimes I'm having a line of thought and gets interrupted, and my brain is not very young anymore, and then I lose it. I have to ask people, say what I was saying, where I was going with this and that. So what I was saying?
We're talking about the intellect, and that there is no separation between.
Yeah. So before we are saying that we have to separate the self from the intellect, because there is a huge confusion there. And now the teaching says that the intellect cannot be separate from the consciousness, awareness, because it's There is no distance. You know, the intellect is consciousness, fundamentally. It is consciousness, everything is consciousness. But yet we need to, in our mind, isolate consciousness to understand what is the subject and what are the objects. And then later on we can understand that, yes, but anyhow, it's all me. All objects have their existing within me and not separate from me, not even a fraction of an inch. There's no question of time, space, distance, or anything. They appear to be separate. Perception gives the illusion that the objects appear away and separate from us. But again, we can play a little bit more with this verse and say, what is this eyes? The objects appearing separate from from me. So what is this I? If we say that the I is the body, and then every object, physical, material object, is appearing separate from me. Outside there is the sense of distance, space, time. If we refer to subtle objects such as thought, memories, and so on, we'll say, oh, this is my inner world, the world of my own feelings and thoughts and so on. And then we say, this is the inner, these are objects that are inside the body. That's the assumption that we say, you know. But in fact, the physical material objects and the mental emotional objects, they are both appearing within consciousness and not away from consciousness. Okay? So, what is this I that we assume, that we mistake as the I when we say that objects are there and I am here? It's the physical body. We are taking ourselves to be the body, and then therefore objects are out there. But when we take ourselves to be the mind, the object, the I to be the mind, when we take the I to be the mind, and then we start understanding that everything is happening within the scope of my mind. When we have an object here, so do the mind has to come here, or the body or anything have to come here? So if the mind would have to come in here, so the first mind coming here maybe would abstract the other minds. The intellect come here, I got here first. You know, I'm the first one to experience this one, or the sense organs come, hey, give me a moment. No, my eyes got here first, and I want to see it first, I want to read it carefully. But no, these objects, they are just appearing within the scope of our minds without any translocation. There's no traveling to the object, they're just appearing within the mind. So what is the distance between this object and the mind? What is the distance? There's no distance. The object is in the mind. Everything is in the mind as a byproduct of those perceptive impressions. It appears in the mind, and the mind is easily resolved, as we have been working through in our scripture, is easily resolved eventually as no other than consciousness, because the mind is an object within the scope of consciousness and no separate from consciousness. Okay? It's consciousness appearing as a thought. Mind, intellect is the I thought, is consciousness appearing as a thought. So, what is the distance or difference between a thought and the mind? There's no difference. Mind is just thought, a flow, constant flux of changing thoughts. I see the tree outside, and I know that the tree is not me. No? We have no problem with getting confused with the tree. I also know that the birds outside my window and the children are here playing in the street are not me. So far so good, right? We don't get confused on that level. We are looking and seeing physical objects, material objects. I seem to exist as a separate entity in a world of varied and independently existing objects. Yet the verse tells me that this perception is false, that the self is the substrate of all these seemingly distinct objects. So the self is the I when we say I this, I that, I see, I hear, I play, I read, and so on. The distinction between Satya and Mithya, the real, and the objects appearing in the real, must be understood clearly if confusion is to be avoided. The text cannot mean that I am the same as the tree or the children play outside. Non-duality is not sameness. Oneness is not sameness. Okay? Oneness means there is only one principle operating, one substratum, and fundamentally everything resolves itself into this substratum. We are all consciousness. But the diversity of objects remain. The text cannot mean that I am the same as the tree or the children or the birds. Certainly, these objects are separate from one another. What the verse says is that they are not separate from consciousness. Nothing is separate from consciousness. Objects belong to a certain order of reality, Ishvara's reality. They are projected and created and maintained by Ishvara, and they are diverse because they are defined by names and forms. So they remain as separate from one another, but they have their common substratum is one with Ishvara and with awareness. Okay, that's the oneness of things. So we are talking about three orders of reality right now. We are talking about consciousness, Ishvara, and the objects. The objects, they remain different and separate from one another because they are Ishvara's projection. But fundamentally, they all resolve themselves with Ishvara. They are just Ishvara. And then Ishvara resolves itself as consciousness. This from the macro perspective. You understand? Certainly, these objects are separate from one another. What the verse says is that they are not separate from consciousness. Let's return to the clay and the pot. Clay can be fashioned into many objects. Many objects besides a pot. So clay can become a ball, a pitcher, a plate, vase, and so on. All these objects are different, yet they are all clay. They are made of the same fundamental substance, nature. The nature of all those objects is clay. A pot is not a pitcher. We cannot say, "Hey, pot, you don't deceive me because to me you are a pitcher or a ball." No, a pot is not a pitcher. But fundamentally, the pot and the pitcher, they are both clay. That's what it means to be one with the substratum. That which inheres in all these forms, that which is their substratum, is the clay. We can look at these objects, however, from the vantage point of their difference or their sameness. We can look at them and say, oh yeah, they are different, they are distinct, and they have different usage, properties, qualities, and so on. When we look at their difference, we are looking at Mithya. Nice, huh? When we are looking at diversity of names and form, we are looking at Mithya. And we cannot deny Mithya. It's a nice, beautiful, apparent reality. And we are here as one among so many other apparent objects. Clay with a particular shape and name that will last in its current form for a period of time, and then it's going to be break down back into its elements. When we look at their sameness, we are looking at Satya, which is reality. Clay as the abiding substratum of the shapes and names it assumes for some time. Have you understood? No? Okay. I will talk to you about that later on. Don't let me forget, okay? In the break, if you're interested. You have gold. Gold may take many shapes. All the gold ornaments, the ring and everything. Fundamentally, they are gold, but they appear as names and forms, right? So the nature of something is that which we cannot negate. Self is the nature of everything, therefore it cannot be negated. We can negate names and forms, attribute to a certain nature, but the nature, the substratum, it's independent from its names and forms, which belongs to a different order of reality. All the objects in creation belongs to Mithya, which is the dimension of names and forms, this projection. But what is the substratum? What is the nature of everything? The self-awareness, consciousness. It's very simple. It's very simple, but we get tricked by it all the time. We get identified with names and forms, and then when we see...
Practice is, when you practice, it's confused because you don't see clearly.
Yeah, we have a...
Yeah. But in practice, you have to all the time remember this.
Yeah, you have to apply the knowledge. You have to have the knowledge.
Expose your mind constantly to this, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can visualize it better.
Absolutely, yeah. So that you don't let Maya trick you over and over again. You say, no, I know. I understood. I understood the game.
And I believe the more casual you get, maybe the more difficult it is.
Sorry? The more?
Maybe the more casual,
Subtle? The more subtle the objects, yes.
maybe you get, I don't know if you get clearer this or more confused because
Yeah.
the line is very thin between.
Totally. Well said. Yeah. We say that we have to separate, isolate the self from the intellect. But the intellect is so close, so to speak, to the consciousness, to the self, that somehow it appears as the self. So how are we going to discriminate the self? It's a very subtle discrimination that we have to somehow do it in our own understanding until we have the direct knowledge, experience that I am the light.
Yes, and then you can get confused being too much identified by your disenlightenment. So you think yourself as just light, but you can get lost between the ego and power. And what you mentioned some classes before with you are the guru and you are the light and you are better than everyone and this kind of
Yeah, that's the ego. The ego can play this kind of tricks very easy. You find it a lot in the spiritual marketplace. People playing big, playing special, put themselves on a pedestal and so on, Okay, here. All objects we perceive have dual aspect as Satya and Mithya. Satya is consciousness, the self. Mithya are the forms that appear in consciousness and to which we assign a particular name. The world, then, is consciousness plus names and forms. But names and forms have no reality in themselves. Reality is that which is always ever existing, present. Names and forms, they keep coming and going. The elements, they just rearrange themselves and keeps bringing about new names and forms. They don't have, those names and forms do not have a reality or substance, so to say. They appear in consciousness and they are nothing other than consciousness, just as the pot is nothing other than clay from which it is fashioned and which it always remains as clay. Whenever we perceive objects as separate from consciousness, we are mistaking Mithya for Satya. The aim of Vedanta is to prevent these mistakes through the unfolding of the great sayings of the Upanishads. In the case of this text is you are that, Tattvamasi, the individual and the substratum are one and the same. Individual in its fundamental, essential nature, the substratum is the only substratum there is, consciousness. That's the truth. Which is different, as you are pointing out. It's not a question of projecting the jiva on Satya, Mithya on Satya, say, oh, I am a jiva, and by the way, I have the status of Satya, I have the status of being enlightened. Therefore, you look up to me and pay respect and so on. You understand? That is a trick that that egos do. And you see it all over the place. That's the beauty of the Vedanta. Vedanta does not give room for anybody to play that. Because Vedanta does not belong to anybody to begin with. So, if you want to share Vedanta, for those of us who have the inclination to share Vedanta, we need to understand, we need to begin by behaving accordingly, because we don't want anybody to pass some wrong reputation or impression of what Vedanta is, Vedanta is a means of knowledge which does not belong to anyone, and there is no ego pretending or putting up any pose to say, oh, I am this, I am that, and I know. No. That means the sense of the doership and ownership of the ego was not yet dissolved or neutralized by self-knowledge. One needs to work a little bit more. So now it's the very nice part. It's this identity of you and consciousness. So it's going to tell us how beautiful we are as consciousness, and everything is us and everything belongs to us. We don't need to be afraid of the world. So everything is ours. The individual self and the limitless self are inquired into properly. Their non-separation is revealed as pointed out in the statement, you are that. When we inquire properly into the nature of the individual, so the result is always the same. Of course, for this inquiry to be made properly, we need a student or individual with certain qualifications developed. Once we have the qualifications in place to certain degrees, and then the result of this investigation, inquiry is always the same. The nature of the individual is no other than the very nature of the self. Therefore, you are that. The aim of Vedanta is to show us that we are not the individual we generally take ourselves to be. So that's when the jiva realizes, hey, the jiva is not really a jiva. It looked like a jiva, but in truth, there is no jiva. When the jiva understands, the ego, it's just an imposter. So it was just dressed up as the self, pretending to be a very, very enlightened guru and so on. And it's just a pose, an imposter. So there is no place for the ego when one knows the truth, and that this truth is firm. So the sense of I am doing and achieving all these things, they go by and by, gradually they disappear. We are not a person. Vedanta shows us that we are not the individual we generally take ourselves to be, and we are so concerned with this individual. I want my jiva to be enlightened. We don't understand that enlightenment is the end of the jiva, in the sense that the jiva loses its sense of existence as anything apart from consciousness. So we need to be clear about that, because enlightenment or self-realization puts an end on this sense of individuality as something apart from consciousness or something apart from Ishvara. That's why self-realization brings about a natural sort of devotion to Ishvara, because we know that we are integral part of Ishvara and everybody is being done by Ishvara, including the Jiva Mukta. Ishvara, before I was dreaming that I was playing my song here, and now I know you play everybody here, so just do what you want with it. I have given up the idea of being a separate entity and just play me as you wish. So that's what self-realization brings, a certain love and respect to Ishvara, because we know that everything here is impersonal, as Jennifer was saying. There is only one.
The jiva doesn't want to hear that.
The jiva does not like. Is the power went off? Huh? Oh, it became a vasana. This vasana of Ishvara of carrying the power and Tiru every day now. Okay. We are told that if we inquire into the meaning of this saying, you are that, it will reveal to us the identity of the individual and the totality as one and the same. This inquiry, however, must be made properly to avoid superimposition, to avoid the mind, the ego, the intellect to trick us and then misunderstand the real meaning of this meaning. It's not the ego. It's everything there is. I'm God. You hear this in the spiritual place very often. I'm God. No, nobody's God. God is the totality. Fundamentally, we are one with God because we are made of the same substratum called consciousness. You understand? But God is all-knowing. God is the one in control of everyone's karmas and so on. The giver of the results of one's karma, actions. We don't have no power. People say, no, I did some course on how to create reality. I read and I did a weekend intensive on the secret. And now I know how to control my life. You see the ego say, no. Now I know how to manifest reality according to my dream. Now I know how to become enlightened. Oh, now I know it. I got to the scriptures, and I'm doing my inquiry. And by the way, don't tell anybody, but I already got it. I'm already enlightened. So if anybody tells you that, you can be sure that the person is tripping. It's the ego co-opting. It's superimposing Mithya on Satya. Inquiry, however, must be made properly, meaning that the words of the text must be assigned the meaning given to them by the teaching tradition. Difference. What is difference? D-E-ference. Difference. Different.
The deference is a
consideration
for.
Consideration for? Okay.
Yeah.
Deference, consideration to the teaching tradition is not mindless obeisance to authority. That's very important. So we need to oppose the logic of the scriptures until we are satisfied with the logic, you understand? It's not because there is a scripture is the authority or a teacher is the authority, no. We need to resolve any kind of questions and doubts. It's not mindedness, belief to the authority, but reliance on what has been proven true in countless instances over a long period of time. That's science. It works. Provided three factors are in place. Yeah? A qualified student, a proper means of knowledge, and a competent teacher. And then we have all the ingredients to make a nice chocolate cake. And then we can enjoy.
Gluten-free.
Vedanta is not the work of a singular genius, but a consensus of countless seekers who have realized the self. In pursuing any science, we do not start from the scratch, but rather base our study upon what has been discovered and proven true to date. You find people in the spiritual world, they disregard the scriptures, they disregard any knowledge, spiritual knowledge, besides the Upanishads and Vedanta, and they say, no, I can do it better. I will come up with a new, modern, very smart way of enlightening people. You see kids doing that out there. No, I have worked out. I'm working. There are a lot of kids doing that. I'm working on a proper method of teaching that I'm going to enlighten housewives and people behind the decks in the cashiers in the supermarket, everybody, because, I know better. And they have to begin from the scratch because they don't want to take advantage of the knowledge available to time.
It's challenged information, That's why it's impure. James says it's challenged. It goes to
channeling.
Challenge. It goes to a pipe and it's impurities.
Yeah, and a lot of the time it's not even channel. It's somebody has a brilliant mind and then comes with this idea. Now I'm very smart. I'm going to disregard the science of non-duality or the science of enlightenment, and I'm going to come up with something better. So you find it often. In pursuing any science, we do not start from the scratch, but rather we take advantage of what is known up to date. That knowledge, however, if it is to become practical and existential, must be made our own knowledge. Any knowledge, it's only as good and it's integrated and becomes my knowledge. So I'm talking even in terms of objective knowledge. Whatsoever Einstein knew, it's good for him, but it means nothing to me because it's not my knowledge, it's his knowledge, for example. I would have to work hard to come to the same conclusions that he came, and they say, okay, now it's my knowledge. Now I understand his equation. No, it's my knowledge now. Otherwise, it's not knowledge. So, what does the teaching tradition tell us? That is a technical word in Vedanta, not just a demonstrative pronoun, because that is not point to any object with properties and attributes, It's a technical word in Vedanta. It stands for the self manifest as the apparent world. That is the totality of perceptible objects.
That is an object.
Huh?
That is an object.
Which is an object.
Yeah.
What did you say?
It stands for the self manifested as the
Yeah, manifested the apparent world.
It is an object.
Yes. It's the self appearing as the object called the world, the universe. To begin with, is pointing to substratum of the world, because at the beginning we need to make the distinction. Otherwise, we are just saying we are not helping the jiva to begin with its discrimination between its substratum and its apparent name and form. So we are talking to human jivas here. So the work is always to negate reality to the objects appearing within consciousness, so that we can see consciousness as the substratum. For later on we can say consciousness is the substratum and the objects appearing in it. We have used Ishvara previously to mean the cosmic order which governs the way in which objects interact. U stands for the individual jiva, the collection of physical, mental, and intellectual attributes with which we identify as a person, or our personality, our ego. Now we understand that our personality, or the ego, to be separate from the totality of objects. We look at the cosmos, the stars, the planets, and the earth on which we are standing, and we see ourselves as separate from this ground show to be small and isolated in respect to the universe. So when we say you, we're pointing to the name and form called the jiva, I. And it's an object among so many others. It's saying that you, this speck of dust, like any other microscopic speck of dust, is in reality made of the same substratum called consciousness. The verse tells us that we are mistaken in this vision when we take ourselves to be independent, isolated, and frightened by the vision of this infinite universe in which we appear like so fragile and vulnerable and bound by all those thoughts of fear. In fact, the verse declares 9 times, the text declares 9 times in the soul's text that the individual and the totality are one. Tatvamasi in the Sanskrit. How can this be true? We may wonder. On the face of it, the saying seems to be absurd. How can something small to be the totality? It seems absurd. Or perhaps a bit like a wishful thought. Thinking like, I wish that I'm God. I'm the totality. A wishful poetry, a metaphor for something like when a national leader says he is one with his people. This is very nice, huh? We had this situation in Brazil. One of those working class guys started going to politics, became a little famous, and then he tried 1 time, 2 times, 3 times until he became a president. and he was the leader, like a national leader who says that I am one with all of you, don't worry. My only interest is the interest of the totality. We are all from the working class. And then once he went there, he damaged the country like none other president did in Brazil, you know. It's all about me, you know. And I don't even know you. There is only me in the universe. But the Upanishad is insistent that this declaration, the individual is the totality, should be accepted as a fact. So if we accept this means of knowledge as true, we must accept the declaration as it is intended, meaning to say the individual and the totality are not separate, and they are one, they are made of one substratum. To inquire into this properly, we must find the common ground of these two seemingly disparate terms, you and that. And this we'll do following the method prescribed by the teaching tradition, which will be unfolded in the following verse. Next. Now we're going to have a little time for publicity, and then we carry on our... I look like, the movie is going on. Oh, stop, advertisement. Yeah. Okay, so we get back after 15 minutes or so, and we begin from verse 75.